Hi, everybody. Welcome to TOEIC. Now, actually, this is English Digest, but we're going to be talking about TOEIC in today's lesson. It's our TOEIC lesson for the month of June. And, of course, some of you may be wondering, gee, should I take the TOEIC, should I take the TOEFL, or should I take the IELTS? It's a good question.
Yeah, usually with our TOEIC units, we don't actually talk about these exams, right? Or these certificates that you can get if you've passed some of these tests. But today we're actually talking about English certificate tests that you can take to prove that you have some sort of proficiency in English. So we're going to get started by looking at a conversation between Jack and Mrs. Hobbs. And we'll see what we can learn. And then we'll be talking about some of these words in particular. And as you know, in our TOEIC unit, we only get to listen to our Chinese teacher once. So get ready. Here we go.
Mrs. Hobbs, can I get your opinion on something?
Certainly.
After I get my diploma, I'm planning to apply for a job as a systems analyst. This position would require corresponding with overseas clients, so I feel an English proficiency certificate would come in handy.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think it would be a good addition to your resume.
I'm just a bit perplexed about which one I should get. There are so many nowadays, including the TOEIC, TOEFL, and IELTS.
I see what you mean. It can be extremely confusing. I would rule out the TOEFL immediately, since it is primarily for academic institutions.
I guess that narrows it down to two choices.
They are both excellent options, but I would recommend that you obtain a TOEIC certificate.
Is there any particular reason for that?
Employers in Asia typically judge job candidates' English capabilities by their TOEIC scores.
I see. So how should I proceed?
First, you should understand the structure of the test. It has two components, reading and listening. Scores range from 10 to 990.
I know it's hard to predict, but how do you think I will do?
You've made noticeable improvements this semester, and you were already nearly fluent before that. So I'm confident that you will excel on the exam. I think you should target a score of 860 so you can receive a gold certificate.
Okay, everybody, this is our TOEIC unit for the month of June. And the title of our article is actually a question, which English certificate is right for me? Well, hopefully we're going to tell you which certificate might be right for you. And again, a certificate is some kind of certification or it's recognition of some achievement that you have had. So, of course, if you pass a certain exam or you show proficiency in some sort of field, then you'll get some sort of certificate, which indicates that you are qualified in that area. You have met some qualifications, standards, and you're ready to take the next step to look for a job, to enter a university, or whatever the case may be.
So yeah, these certificates can be very important. And so we're going to focus, of course, on the English certificates that are available out there for people who are learning English as a second, third, fourth, fifth language.
And that's what we're here for. That's why we have this magazine and this program. We want to help you with your English. You certainly wouldn't listen to our program. So that's what we're here for, to help you pass whatever examination you want to take. And Jack has a question for Mrs. Hobbs.
Okay.
And she addresses her properly. Mrs. Hobbs, can I get your opinion on something? I could use this opportunity to mention that when we address our teachers in the United States, we usually use this title title, Mr. or Mrs. or Miss, or even Ms. It depends on the teacher. And then their surname. It's common here in Taiwan because you use 老师, that term. So I often hear, Teacher Tom, Teacher Lisa or whatever. That's cute. We let you guys do that because that's how you do things here in Taiwan. But if you're in the U.S., that would be kind of disrespectful. So you should say like Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Lee. And if it's in university, of course, you'd say Professor Lee, Professor Zhang, or whatever.
That's really good advice, actually. It still makes me smile when I hear it because usually I'm not teaching something, but even in church, the little kids will say teacher, so it's fun. Now, Jack tells Mrs. Hobbs what he's actually looking for. He says, after I get my diploma, it's a piece of paper you get when you finish your 4 years of school, bachelor's degree usually, or maybe you're getting an associate's degree, that's 2 years of college. But here he's talking about his diploma, that piece of paper that says you officially finished your courses and you have earned a certain level of education, whether it's a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, even a PhD. They always give you a diploma as proof. So he says, I'm planning to apply for a job as a systems analyst. So he's in computing field, you could say. It looks like he studied computer science, probably. I'm just making a guess there. This job position would require corresponding with overseas clients. If you correspond with somebody, you exchange mail, whether it's email or snail mail, as we sometimes call it because it's very slow. You're still corresponding with someone. If you're talking to someone on the phone or using the internet to talk to someone live, that's not corresponding. That's communicating. Corresponding would definitely mean you're putting your words on paper or in an email of some sort.
Right, so of course he's probably going to be corresponding and communicating with overseas clients by email, by text messaging, or video conferencing, or whatever. So of course he feels that he needs an English proficiency certificate and that it would come in handy. If something comes in handy, of course, it's useful. It serves a purpose. And proficiency here is a noun. It just refers to how good you are at something, how well you can speak English, how well you can write it, how well you can read it, etc., etc. So proficiency just measures your ability in something. And the adjective is proficient. You could say, I'm proficient in Mandarin Chinese and Taiwanese and Spanish and Portuguese or whatever.
But there is no verb with proficient itself. You could say I'm becoming proficient. I'm developing proficiency in something, but there is no I'm going to proficient something. There's no verb like that. So Mrs. Hobbs says, I agree with you wholeheartedly. With your whole heart means she completely agrees. There's not even a little bit of her heart that doesn't support this idea. She thinks it's great, and she thinks it would be a good addition to your resume. It's something you can add to your resume when you're listing your degrees, your diplomas, your extra education. Maybe you've had a workshop in something that would show your employer you're learning more about the information out there. Maybe updating your education. Maybe you've already graduated. It's been 10 years. Technology changes. Maybe you want to list some additional courses you've had since your graduation. Anyway, those are things that you can put on your resume. I know with people who are from the UK especially, European folks tend to talk about their curriculum vitae or the list of qualifications they have. For us Americans, at least, we just say resumes. So Jack says he's a bit perplexed about which one he should get. You know, there are different types of English certificates. If you're perplexed, you're puzzled. Confused, more puzzled. You know, I'm not quite sure. I'm perplexed. That's a perplexing problem. You can practice your P sounds saying perplexing problem.
That's hard, even for you, isn't it? And then he goes on to say there are so many nowadays. There are lots of different certificates out there, different exams you can take to get that certificate. And he lists a couple of examples here. He says, including the TOEIC, TOEFL, and IELTS. TOEIC is a test of English for international communication, test of English as a foreign language, and IELTS. That's one I hadn't really heard of before, but I guess you all have to take that, or some people do.
I've seen it. I've never heard it pronounced, so now I know how to say it.
Yes, I guess you guys say IELTS, which stands for International English Language Testing System. So those are some exams that you can take, and if you score well enough on those exams, then you will get a certificate saying that you passed that exam.
Ooh, excellent. So those are 3 that you might look into if you yourself are considering getting an English certificate. Mrs. Hobbs says, I see what you mean, how it's kind of puzzling or confusing about which one to get. It can be extremely confusing. She says, I would rule out the TOEFL immediately since it is primarily for academic institutions. If you rule something out, it means you are looking at a bunch of options, different choices you can make. If you rule one out, it means, I'm not going to consider this one anymore. It's off your list. So to rule something out, again, just means you're not going to consider it any further. Maybe you're thinking about vacation plans, different countries you can go to. Maybe there's one country that is having some unrest, maybe they look like they might break out into a war. You might want to rule that country out. So rule out as a verb phrase can be separated as most verb phrases can, to rule something out or rule out something.
Just not to consider it, so you don't have to waste your time taking the TOEFL, because you probably would need to take that if you were applying for graduate school. And of course, a graduate school is in a university, and that is an example of an academic institution. And here, Jack, of course, is just trying to get a job as a systems analyst, and that doesn't really have to do with going to university, so he can rule out the TOEFL. And Jack says, well, I guess that narrows it down to 2 choices. So if you narrow something down, that just means you reduce the choices and you're getting closer to your final decision. And here's what Mrs. Hobbs says. They are both excellent options. They're both excellent choices, but I would recommend that you obtain a TOEIC certificate. So you could take either one, the TOEIC and the IELTS, but she thinks that the TOEIC would be better. She recommends that he obtain that certificate, that he take that exam and get that certificate.
He wants to know if there's any particular reason for that. I would definitely be asking that question if I were Jack, too. Well, she says employers in Asia, that's where we are, typically, or most of the time, generally, judge job candidates' English capabilities by their TOEIC scores. So they don't have a lot of time to interview you. They might be selecting candidates based on just the resume and the TOEIC scores, and not looking to actually schedule interviews before ruling someone out. So it's good knowledge to have if you already understand that employers in Asia, they're looking for those TOEIC scores. So that makes for a good reason to get your TOEIC English certificate. These certificates aren't cheap either. Just so you know, you have to pay some bucks for them. They're not cheap. So you probably can't afford to get all 3 or even 2. So make sure you get the one that will really help you the most.
Yeah, you probably still need one if you want to apply for a job at an international company. So prepare to shell out some bucks for that. And yes, indeed, that again is the test that she recommends, the TOEIC certificate, the TOEIC examination. So that's settled. They've decided which one that he should take. And he says, I see, I understand. So, therefore, how should I proceed? So here we've got the word proceed, and that just refers to the way you do things, including all different steps that you need to take. So how do you proceed with applying to a university? What do you need to do? What are the steps that you need to take? How do I proceed when applying for a passport? Well, you need to get a photo, you need to get the application forms, you need to fill them in, you need to pay the fee, etc. Those are the steps. That's the procedure, and that's the noun. What's the procedure? He could also ask that, but you could also use the verb here. How should I proceed? How should I do this?
And the noun would be the process. What's the process? So how should you move forward? How should you begin a course of action? Well, Mrs. Hobbs said first, you should understand the structure of the test. That's really important. Don't go to a test without knowing beforehand what it's going to be like or how you can prepare yourself mentally. It will help you a lot more. She says it has two components. A component is a piece of something. We often use this word to talk about computers. What components are you needing to replace in your CPU, your computer brain? So a component, again, is just a part of something else, components of something. It's got two components, reading and listening. There's no writing, which is actually a good thing. Writing is very hard. But you still have reading and listening, and the scores can range from 10 to 990. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody about their TOEIC scores, so I don't know what people generally get on these.
Okay, so of course, like any test, you need to prepare for it, but indeed, he wants to know the procedure here. How should I prepare for this test? Again, you need to know that there are two components to the test, reading and listening, and Jack goes on to say, well, I know it's hard to predict, it's hard to say, but how do you think I will do? You know me, you know my English proficiency.
Yeah.
What do you think? Am I going to do well on that exam? Do I really need to cram for this exam? And Mrs. Hobbs says, you've made noticeable improvements this semester, and you were already nearly fluent before that, so I'm confident you will excel on the exam. So here we can tell that Mrs. Hobbs is Jack's teacher. Perhaps she's his professor. And of course, she has seen his progress, and she says that he's made noticeable improvements, not just little tiny ones, but they're noticeable, they're significant. They are big improvements, big enough to notice. So yeah, you're probably close to being fluent. And so I'm confident that you will do well on that exam. You will excel.
Ooh, that's nice to hear from someone who's been working with you and teaching you that they think you will have a good chance at great success. So because Jack has made those really obvious improvements, she thinks he's going to be he's going to do very well on the test. She says excel, that's a verb we use when someone's going to do very, very well on something. He excels at sports. She excels in music. You can use in or at. To excel at something, again, just means you do very, very well. She thinks he should set a goal for himself, a target. That's another way to set a goal. You have a target that you've put down in your mind. She thinks a score of 860 would be good because I guess they give different types of certificates out based on how well you did. And it looks like they are using the color of a metal here, gold. Of course, we all know that gold is the best. So we'll see how he does. It's good to know a little bit more about this stuff, though, especially how to prepare yourself mentally to take one of these English certificate exams.
Indeed. So, of course, he probably still should probably do some cramming before the test. Don't be overconfident, but it does sound like he's going to do a good job on that exam and get that certificate. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. We're going to come back in just a couple of seconds to talk about some useful expressions, and we'll have a discussion question. But first, we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher.
大家好，我是派老师。今天讲解的是6月份6月21号 Unit 13 Which English Certificate is right for me? 这个单元是多益听力阅读练习。第一天课程是绘画，对话主题和报考英文能力检定有关。我们知道英文能力检定有百百种，到底应该要选择哪一种英文能力检定对我们来说比较有利？我们一起来听听看绘画当中的这些人物他们的看法如何？好，看过了他们的说法之后，我们看看他们的绘画当中有哪些重要的单字片语和句型。首先看到 Jack， 他想要请问 Mrs. Hobbs 老师的意见，他就说 Can I get your opinion on something？ 这句话同学可以学起来。 当你想要请教别人的时候，就可以这样子问他 Can I get your opinion on something? Can I get your opinion on something? 好，接着我们再往下看 Jack 他就说开始说明了他想要请教的事情是什么。 After I get my diploma, 我在拿到文凭之后 After I get my diploma 指的就是文凭。他拿到文凭之后呢，希望能够去找工作当一个系统分析师。而系统分析师的职缺 This position would require corresponding with overseas clients. 这个职务上面会有一些需求，包括说他必须要做哪些事。所以我们知道说一个职务如果要求担任这个职务的人要做哪些事，我们可以用 require 这个动词。这个职务呢，做这个职务我必须要和海外的客户通信。好，再来请同学看到 come in handy 这个片语。 An English proficiency certificate would come in handy. 就是如果有一张证书可以证明我的英文能力，会很方便。 come in handy 指的就是会派得上用场。再来请同学看到 Mrs. Hobbs 的回复，她说 I agree with that wholeheartedly. 意思所指的就是 I totally agree. 我完完全全的同意。而且这里请看到 wholeheartedly 就是我由衷的，我全然的同意。 I think it would be a good addition to your resume. It would be a good addition to your resume. 其实就像我们中文所说的，对你的履历是大大的加分。再来我们请同学看到 Mrs. Hobbs 开始就告诉他说，你刚刚所讲的 TOEIC、TOEFL 还有 IELTS 这些考试，我知道非常的多。其实 I see what you mean. It can be extremely confusing. 有这么多会让人家不知道从何选择。I would rule out the TOEFL immediately. Rule out 指的就是排除这个选项。Rule out 就是把托福这个选项排除掉。它后面呢也说明了理由。为什么？因为托福主要是为了学术机关，像学校要看你的托福成绩。It is primarily for academic institutions. 就是为了学术机构要给他们看的。好，那 Jack 就说 I guess that narrows it down to two choices. 当我们说原本有很多选项进一步的变少了之后，我们就可以用 narrow down 这个片语，把什么的范围限缩，就用 narrow down 这个片语。好，那这样子的话，我就只剩下2个选择。再来请同学看到 Mrs. Hobbs 她的回复， Employers in Asia typically judge job candidates' English capabilities by their TOEIC scores. 所以 Mrs. Hobbs 就直接说，通常在亚洲的老板，他们判断求职者英文能力好不好，会看他们的多益成绩。They judge job candidates' English capabilities. 用什么来判断？ By their TOEIC scores. 好，接下来 Jack 就问说，那下一步该做什么？怎么问呢？ How should I proceed? How should I proceed? 其实就像 What should I do next? 好，接着我们看到老师给他的建议就是，你必须要先了解这个考试它的内容，分成2部分，听力跟阅读。然后呢，总分从10分到990分 ，Scores range from 10 to 990。好的，以上就是我们针对 TOEIC 这一段对话所做的中文讲解。谢谢大家。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're going to look at our useful expressions now. After listening to our Chinese teacher, we hope you learned some more there. Here are discourse markers. Discourse is just a conversation, and a marker is some way to signal something. It's kind of a sign of something. So sometimes you're in a conversation, you want to change the subject. Or maybe you need to get out of there. Maybe you have something that you need to run to, and you need to kind of close that conversation off. Well, here's one. You could say, well, anyhow, maybe you've been talking about yourself, and you want to hear how your partner is doing. Maybe you're talking to someone, maybe a friend. And this is a way just to shift that conversation away from yourself. You could say, well, anyway, how was your day today? Or how are you doing today? Because they already know how you're doing. You've been talking about yourself, and this is a way to signal that you're changing the conversation, the subject at least.
Yeah, of anyway and anyhow, I would say anyway is far more common. You hear that all the time. Anyway, let's move on now to the second point here. Now or so, these are ways that you can change the direction of a conversation. Well, now that we understand that, let's take a look at this other issue. So let's get down to business. We've just, had nice conversations with each other, but now it's time to get down to business. So let's get down to business.
Yeah, that is definitely a line that a boss might use. Or maybe just someone who is supervising a group. Sometimes you get talking and you realize that time's slipping away. And so someone says, well, let's get down to business. Don't waste too much time. So now we should probably get down to business. Hey, we should probably get cracking on what we have. Number 3 is well, or you see. The reason for my call is to make you a special offer. I know that when I get calls from telemarketers, people trying to sell me something, they usually don't ask about my day first. They don't care. They know that they only have a small window of time before someone, hangs up on them or says, I'm not interested. So they just keep talking. But this is a way that if you're talking to a friend and you have a serious topic, but you want to first ask about them, see how they're doing, and then get into the real meat of the discussion. This is a way to shift it again.
And now we've got our discussion question. Can you name some other jobs besides systems analyst that might require a good TOEIC test score?
I would say if you're going into sales, you should probably get your English certificate. If you are working for a multinational corporation, that's always good. Then there are lots of possibilities. You could actually move to a different country, a different location if you could speak English. If you're a doctor, I would say doctors probably have to use a lot of English. I think your doctors here in Taiwan have pretty good English, from my experience at least.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion, and we require you, of course, to have a discussion amongst yourselves, and hopefully we've helped you prepare for the TOEIC exam, but we've got more to talk about in our next program. Please join us then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.